Okay, imagine holding a piece of history so old it could literally rewrite one of the most important stories in the world. We're talking about three tiny, unassuming scraps of papyrus that completely ignited an academic firestorm. And why? Well, because a powerful new scientific analysis suggested they weren't just some old copy of the New Testament, they might just be an eyewitness account.
So let's get right into it, because this is the question at the heart of everything. Is it possible that a document written when people who knew Jesus were still alive has been hiding in plain sight in an Oxford library this whole time? That's the absolutely explosive idea we are going to unpack today.
To really get your head around how big a deal this is, you just have to look at the dates. For decades, everybody agreed this fragment was from around the year 200 AD. But the new scientific evidence, it rewinds the clock a whopping 140 years, all the way back to about 60 AD. That is a massive leap, shrinking the gap between the actual events of the Gospels and our first physical evidence.
So what exactly is this artifact that's causing this whole scientific revolution? Scholars call it Papyrus 64, but you probably know it as the Magdalen Papyrus. And honestly, if you were to look at it, you might wonder what all the fuss is about.
It's really just three little pieces. The text on them comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26, the part describing the events right before the crucifixion. And for years, they just sat there, quietly, at Magdalen College in Oxford, with everyone basically agreeing on a safe, comfortable date, late 2nd century. An old copy for sure, but still, just a copy. Now this timeline really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Jesus' life ends around 30 AD. The old date for this fragment, 200 AD, leaves a huge gap of 170 years. That's several generations for stories to be copied and recopied. But, and this is the key, if the date is actually 60 AD, that gap shrinks to only 30 years. That's well within a single generation.
And this brings us to the person who dared to challenge decades of consensus and really kickstarted this whole scientific breakthrough, a German paperologist named Carsten Peter Thiede.
So back in 1994, Thiede publishes his research, and he presents a case that was not only incredibly bold, but also backed by some serious, meticulous work. He basically argued that the entire field had been missing the evidence for decades. He demonstrated that the Magdalen Papyrus wasn't from the 2nd century at all. It was much, much older.
And this quote right here, it gets to the very heart of why his discovery sent shockwaves through the world. See, he wasn't just tweaking a number on a timeline. He was presenting hard evidence that this fragment could have been written down while the apostles and others who knew Jesus personally were still walking the earth. This wasn't just ancient history anymore. This was living memory, captured on papyrus.
So how did he build such a rock-solid, conclusive case? Well, Thiede's argument stands on two incredibly powerful pillars of evidence. And the first one is a classic, time-tested technique, the forensic analysis of ancient handwriting.
It's a field called comparative paleography, and the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. Handwriting styles change over time, kind of like fashion or slang. Scribes in 50 AD made their letters differently than scribes in 200 AD. So, if you can find documents that have a confirmed date, like a legal contract or even a farm receipt, you can use their script as a benchmark to date other, unknown texts with amazing precision. And this just lays out the evidence perfectly. Thiede showed that when you look really closely at the script on the Magdalen fragment, especially at certain key letters like alpha and eta, it just doesn't look like the style from the late 2nd century. But when you put it next to scripts from documents we know for a fact are from the 1st century, well, the resemblance is just unmistakable. And this wasn't just some gut feeling he had. He brought the receipts, so to speak. He pointed to specific examples with rock-solid dates, things like Greek fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were sealed in caves before 68 AD, papyri from Herculaneum, literally frozen in time by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. He even used a farm account that was precisely dated to the year 66. The handwriting was a clear, demonstrable match to the 1st century. Period.
All right, let's get to the second pillar of his argument, because this is where the case moves beyond traditional scholarship and into the world of objective, cutting-edge science. This is what really locks in the conclusion. Get this, he didn't just look at the fragments with his eyes. He put them under a confocal laser scanning microscope. This is an incredible piece of technology that moves way beyond human interpretation. It builds a microscopic, three-dimensional digital model of every single fiber of the papyrus and every layer of ink, gathering completely objective data.
So why would you do that? Well, it was all to analyze something in handwriting called the ductus. The easiest way to think about it is like the unique fingerprint of a scribe's technique. You know, the direction they moved their pen, the order of the strokes they used, just to make a single letter. It's a level of detail that's totally invisible to the naked eye, but to the laser, it's crystal clear.
And the process was just brilliantly methodical. First, the 3D scan allowed him to measure the actual height and depth of the ink, which revealed which stroke was laid down on top of another. From that data, he could digitally reconstruct the precise movements of the scribe's hand. And the conclusion from all this data was stunning. The microscopic analysis of the ductus scientifically confirmed what the paleography had already shown. This was the work of a first-century scribe.
So here's the bottom line, the crucial point. The scientific case became undeniable. You have the classic method of comparing handwriting styles, which points directly to a first-century origin. And then you have the revolutionary method of laser microscopy, which independently verifies that exact same conclusion. Both lines of evidence pointed to the same radical, history-changing fact.
And that really leaves us with a pretty wild thought, doesn't it? This scientific reevaluation of something everyone just assumed was true has completely changed our understanding of this text. It forces you to ask, if a manuscript this important can be revealed just by applying new science to an old artifact, what other revolutionary secrets are just sitting in our museums and archives waiting to be discovered?